I think that this property is uniquely positioned to benefit from the gentrification almost in every direction going on around it. And that was one of the things that way back when I was looking at it, and I don't know, 2015, 2016 really drew me to the idea was, man, if there's a way to cash flow and just kind of cover long term, I think that this could really appreciate in value. What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and I'm really excited for another episode of Deal Destruction. I've got Kevin joining me. Hey, Kevin, how's it going?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. So I'm actually really excited to jump into this deal that you're sharing today because me and this deal have a little bit of a history. So before we even get into like your whole story behind it and the property you're looking at, I've actually, came really close to buying this property when I think 2 owners ago it was for sale. And I can remember both myself and Mike Rosehart were both looking at it. Both of us were very interested in potentially snagging this property. But at the time, I think just neither of us really, like, with hindsight, it's so easy to be like, well, that was silly. But honestly, at the time, it seemed pricey for what the owners wanted for it. Now, I'm sure that you're probably buying it for double the price. And at this point in time, I probably don't even disagree with it. But it is a really unique parcel. And just for anyone that's not really familiar, it's backing right onto the river, which I think there's pros and cons to it, but it kind of creates a nice natural buffer in a way with neighbors as well. So like, at least you don't got to worry about neighbors to the north, if nothing else. But yeah, so I guess before I ramble on nostalgically about this the entire episode and how much I regret not buying it, for anyone that's unfamiliar, this property is actually made up of 2 buildings, right? So we're looking at a 4-plex and a 6-plex. Mm-hmm. And then you've also got interesting income potential because of the actual billboards as well. So that's super cool because billboards are never going to call you to change their or unclog their toilets or anything like that. So, and it's kind of on this nice little dead-end street. It really does have that picturesque overlooking the river. And yeah, I guess before I talk any more about it, why don't you kind of give us a snapshot of where you're at and where this deal is at?
So I guess this will be my actual second buy. I have a 6-plex on Hill Street, which is like literally across the road.
Nice.
So I figured for me, it'd be easy to just go up one way, visit, do the property management on the way back, do the property management on this side. So that was kind of it. And I was actually the same as you. I actually was looking at this property for probably the last two sales, but I just wasn't in the knowledge and in the mind state to really get into it and pull the trigger, right? So, and also I guess capital. But that's pretty much where I am. I actually, this deal is under contract and we're pretty much moving forward with it, financing approved. So we're just waiting for it to close.
All right. So I'm going to pull up my spreadsheet here. And if you don't mind, just give us a quick little breakdown. We don't need to go super in depth, but for purchase price, what are we looking at?
Do you want the negotiated purchase price or just the listing?
Yeah, give me the negotiated. And just as an FYI, this video won't come out until after you're closed anyways, likely. So there shouldn't be any issues there.
So we negotiated down to 1,315.
Okay. I like the price point that you're coming at already. So that's great. We're looking at less than 100,000 a unit. Or no, sorry, we're looking at less than 140,000 a unit here. Because this is a 10-plex. Plus we've got the billboard.
The billboard, so this is the interesting part. So we've been watching it when it's had the billboard. This is the first time it does not have the billboard. They took it down.
Oh.
So that was going to be one of my things to see if I can go back and figure out why it was taken down, right?
Interesting. Okay, so the company that did the billboard, like I assume it's all there. They just don't have billboards up anymore, or like did they literally deconstruct this whole behemoth?
It's down to the grass.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, next time you take a look, you'll see. Next time you drive by.
Yeah, like I'm sure it'll stick out like a sore thumb now that I'll be looking for it, but fascinating. Okay. I can't imagine why they would unless there was some sort of safety issue there, because it seems like it cost more than it'd be worth to take down. But okay, interesting.
It's also rusty too. Like if you see that picture, it was very rusty,
Yeah.
so it probably was a safety. Um,
Okay.
and
So
there's a lot of trees there too. So anyway,
yeah, for rental, what are we looking at for gross?
gross is it was $108,000.
Okay. So about 9K. Okay, so we're averaging about $900 a month, it looks like, per unit. And it's actually been a while since I checked out this building. So I forget, were most of them one bedrooms, two bedrooms, or what's the unit split there?
Yeah, there's a couple one bedrooms. It's pretty much even split, twos and ones, more ones actually. And
Okay.
then there's the one they call I guess they just call it the box, but it's just like a small bachelor room. That's all it is.
Okay. So is it like 6 one bids, 3 two, and then a single or something like that?
Um, yeah, I'm trying to get to my screen here. All I have is full screen of this.
No worries. And we don't need to dive deep into it, but it's probably something like that. So then we've got our rentals or our rental income for expenses. We can go line item, but if you also just have a bulk expenses, whatever makes more sense.
Yeah, so I'll just say the bulk.
Yep.
Well, I guess the expenses, I'm not too sure the bulk expenses. The NOI though is 67. So I guess we'll just
Okay.
reverse that one.
And then was that factoring in like a decent property management, repairs and maintenance and stuff, or were they kind of stretching the truth there?
Yeah, they had property management. I think that was 4,800 a month.
Or a year, probably?
Oh, sorry, a year. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
Yes, a year. And then property taxes was 15,000. Um, the insurance was 4,500. What else was there? Yeah, that's pretty
Okay,
much it.
well, $400 a month for property management, I don't think is on the high end, but you're coming in at like 3-4%, right? 5% ish of what your gross income is. So, if anything, there's maybe a few $100s probably in overlooked expenses, or I wouldn't be surprised by that. But um, as a back of the envelope, it makes sense to me. So, I guess a few of my initial thoughts on this property is I know what scared Mike Rosehart away from it, and he's still of the opinion that he thinks it's really close to the water's edge. Um, I know when we walked the property, I brought through a contractor whose opinion I really respect, and he didn't have any concerns. And so he's usually the one that shits on my deals and makes me walk away from them. So when he didn't shit on it, I was like, okay. And we actually did get to the point of having my insurance guy walk the property to give us a quote. And from an insurance perspective back then, at least, he didn't have any issues either. So just for anyone that's kind of curious, we can see, you got the water's edge right there. The properties are pretty close to the edge. There's maybe just a few feet before the drop off. And then you kind of get into the river. When you guys were looking at this property, what was your due diligence process like?
So we actually had 10 days to pretty much get financing. So that was pretty quick and stressful, but it ended up working out. So other than that, I'm very, very knowledgeable about like property management and all that kind of stuff. So I was looking around. Plus, they provided an inspection report, but truthfully, when it comes from a realtor, I always have red flags because they're obviously not going to point out the big stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they did point out a lot of little small things, right? Oh yeah, a little bit of moisture in the ceiling or whatever it was, but it's like, okay, well, no, we know it needs a roof. So that didn't really help me. So I wanted to go there, and I did exactly what you said. Is I wanted to look at the retaining walls. I wanted to see if there was any degrading on the over the years. I asked the tenants, "Have you noticed the line of dirt slowly creeping?" And everyone seems to say no. Have you seen the water? How high is the water you've seen over the last years? Because those guys have been there for 10 years. One guy, right? So he's like, "Oh, I've seen it come, 2-3 feet from the retaining wall, right?" So that's pretty high. But that was like once in a 10-year span. So can't say it won't happen again, but it was very rare at that point. But I did look at that, and there's also a couple of trees that were hanging off the side. But luckily, I guess if they go in, they're going in the water. No, I mean,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for sure. And then, so if I remember correctly, the fourplex, it should be in pretty good shape because the last time I saw it, the owner had one of the units gutted, and he was like kind of putting in I think new boiler system or new heating system, something like that. It's been a while, but uh we had the fourplex and then the sixplex. So overall, the condition, I'm assuming everything's in like relatively easy to rent condition, other than maybe one or two of the units that haven't had tenant turnover.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. The fourplex, all the units in there were really nice. They were all done, and like even to my standard, like I mean, we splurge a little bit on our rentals, which may be a good or bad thing, but it was really done nice, smelled good. The tenants looked clean. I got to meet them; they were clean. Um, like I got a nose like a dog, so if I could smell something, then I would know. But yeah, that one was good. The sixplex, on the other hand, I think it had two units that would need really good work. And I'd love to turn the tenants over too as well because they were just a little bit on the rougher side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this like overall, just for any investors that are interested, it really is a unique location here. So I've actually Jeff and I have an apartment building within walking distance of this, and then you mentioned that you had a property on Hill Street, right?
Mhm.
Sixplex here, and I'm drawing a blank now, but this year it was either on Hill Street or on South Street. There was a purpose-built multifamily that was all one bedrooms, where half the units were fixed up, half the units weren't. It went firm right. I think their condition period was when COVID kind of got serious around mid to late March, and they ended up selling it for 146,000 a unit. So that was a number that really stood out to us because I own a very similar building within walking distance. A lot of investors, a lot of London investors, right? And I'm sure this is no news to you, Kevin. They're going to look at this area as a mixed bag, right? It's kind of a grab bag of tenant. You might get some, young hipster tech entrepreneurs that work on Horton Street. You also might have some people that are on social assistance. We got the Salvation Army here at like the corner of Wellington and Bathurst, which, while providing a important social service, also creates a certain density of users of that social or of those social services, which again can sometimes result in a rougher neighborhood in this area. So I know for most investors, really being in this pocket right here isn't that desirable. But the further you kind of work your way down here, it starts to get a little bit nicer and a little bit more gentrified in these pockets. And then we've got the old South Street Hospital project, which seems to be still moving forward with Medallion. Assuming they break ground and move forward on that, we're potentially looking at 600 new households that'll be middle income in this neighborhood, which I'm expecting to be a huge catalyst, right? Long term. I think what's particularly of interest to me about the property you're buying is the long term potential. So I could see eventually as this area gentrifies and as the southern corridor here of Wellington also gentrifies, and just we've got Wortley Village, which is one of the most desirable neighborhoods in London. It's going to keep pushing this way, like pushing further east. I think that this property is uniquely positioned to benefit from the gentrification almost in every direction going on around it. And that was one of the things that way back when I was looking at it in, I don't know, 2015, 2016 really drew me to the idea was, man, if there's a way to cash flow and just kind of cover long term, I think that this could really appreciate in value. So the fact that you're buying it for around 130,000 a unit, like it or not, that's almost kind of just the going rate for decent units here in London now, especially if you've got a mix of one bids and two bids. So from a fair market evaluation, it kind of checks the box there. Now, what are you roughly looking at for your debt service? Are you financing this through like a lender, or is this like a B or private lender?
A lender.
B lender. And
A
so do
lender.
you
Yeah.
know roughly what you're expecting those mortgage payments to be?
Yeah. I'm gonna say around $5,500 a month, if not $6,000 a month, with
Okay.
principal and interest.
So we're essentially going to be in kind of the break even from day one from a cash flow perspective. Is that kind of the target range if our net operating was 55?
I think you're very close, but I think that after my calculations, I was supposed to be sitting at around 12K, or maybe I'm thinking something different.
In cash flow or burn?
Yeah, you know what? Now you're making me think, man. Thought I had this covered. I thought it was. I'm pretty sure I had I think it was 12K after everything, but I could be wrong. I have to go into those numbers again. But
Gotcha. Yeah, well, and then the other thing is obviously all these units, at least based on the average rent, appear to be under rented, right? Or odds are there's probably two or three that are severely under rented. The rest are maybe getting closer to fair market. But I know for us, our one bedrooms that are walking distance from there, and they're on the south side of the river as well. I think we're renting those for, I want to say like 1100, maybe 1200, and then for the two bids I think we're getting closer to the 1250 to 1400, although right now we're doing a lot of executive rentals with ours in that building for the time being. So I think there is some pressure on rent prices, right? So I've no doubt over the coming years, as you either get natural tenant turnover or maybe you do some cash for keys or implement some other strategies like that, I imagine if you're not going to be cash flowing day one, you'll be able to get there. Obviously, we're just doing real back of the envelope numbers here. One, in part because I know you're already closing on the deal, but two, I don't think that we necessarily need to dive super deep to understand roughly where this property's at, right? I think the biggest driver is just going to be trying to generate one or two of those tenant turnovers, right? And I know that that's a common question a lot of investors have for me on my YouTube channel. So a few thoughts that maybe I haven't covered on recent YouTube videos that I'd share with you are one option that we regularly use for tenants that have been in a building for a long time and maybe don't want to move, like they're not interested in moving away from the area, is what I call like the tenant shuffle. And that's if you get one unit come up vacant, you fix it up, bring it up to its highest use, and then you offer it for rent at a discounted rate to the tenant that's been living there forever. And the primary value in that is one, even if you can inch them up a few $100s a month, from a potential cap rate, it makes a difference. As well, for a lot of them, this now all of a sudden like forces them to have a real choice, where sometimes when you just do the cash for keys option, if they've decided they don't want to leave this exact location, it's easy for them to just give you a fast no because they're like, nope, not moving. Where like the moment we're like, would you consider switching units? And we've got this brand new one fixed up, new kitchen, new painting, new appliances, and we'll still give it to you for a relative discount. You know, let's say that they're renting out for $600 a month and the fair market value is $1,200. Well, most of them aren't going to say yes to a $1,200 doubling their rent, but we do find a lot of them will consider maybe inching it up a few $100s. What about 200? Or what about 300 if we include laundry in your unit, right? Something like that. And for us from a cap rate, it can really help us move the needle in getting this property evaluated for the higher amount. But now we also get their old dated unit and we get to bring that up to its highest best use and then rent that out for a new fair market value. So we end up, rather than just renting out that unit on fair market value that originally came up, we get fair market value plus a few $100s bump. And again, depending upon your numbers, especially when we're looking at relatively tight cash flow like this property, those extra few $100s can actually move the needle from a operation standpoint. And again, I think long term, assuming this property doesn't fall into the river or there's anything crazy going on like that, I think that you could really benefit from a lot of appreciation because I actually view it as a nice little oasis. Like you've got a big parking lot there, you've got some green space, unique units, because at least I remember in the fourplex, some of the units were a decent size overall for 2-bedroom units. The one used to have like a hair salon in it or like a barber shop. I don't know if you'd viewed it way back then, but it had like this really funky layout and stuff. But yeah, I think that it is uniquely positioned. And it is too bad that the billboard isn't there, because that used to, I forget, it was a few $100s a month at least that it was bringing in, that was just kind of set it and forget it income. But I definitely encourage you to find out, is there the option? Because it's on one of the busiest highways in London, right? Going right into the downtown. So hopefully there is an angle there where you don't have to spend any money. They erect a new structure and you can get some truly passive cash flow from it.
Mm-hmm.
So do you guys have any plans day one with this property? Like, is it just kind of take the keys and just wait for tenant turnover, or any thoughts there?
So what we did was we were informed that there was, I think, 2 or 3 tenants that actually were okay with cash for keys. But again, it's just hearsay words, right? So
Right.
like you said, you can go in there and be like, hey, here's 2 months rent. They'll be like, that's not worth it for me to leave,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to do cash for keys. Like they're thinking in their mind, like 10 grand, they walk away maybe. Then yeah, cash for keys. But
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. So if that's viable, so that's the first thing we're gonna do is opposed to meeting all the tenants and just saying, hey, we're the guys that taking over, whatever. If any of you guys want to cash for keys, essentially, and if they say
Yeah.
yes, then we work from there. Other than that, we're just gonna have to do minor things like roof or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And so, Kevin, have you ran the numbers on what works for you as cash for keys? Like, how do you guys determine what price you're willing to go to?
You know what? When it comes down to like those, like if you're gonna go into some nice mathematics, I don't got it. I just say, you know what? I'm willing to go maybe 2 months rent and stay la vie. If you don't want to do it, then I gotta work something else.
Gotcha. So, just to share a different perspective for myself, I'm often looking at ignoring the cost of renovations. Honestly, if my payback period is under a year, I'm usually enticed to buy out a tenancy. And the reason for that is usually I can get a 1-to-1 or greater evaluation on renovations. So say like for me, for like our 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom units that are in that neighborhood, we're usually putting in a new kitchen. We're touching up the bathroom. So we're going to what do they call it? Resurface or reglaze the tiles and the tub surround and that sort of thing. And then we're going to maybe put in a new light fixture, paint everything, slap a new toilet in, and pretty much call it a day. We'll do all new flooring and paint it. That's often going to cost us anywhere from $14,000 to $20,000 a unit, just depending on whether it's a 1 or 2 bedroom and if there was any other deficiencies with the unit. So for me, what I'm usually going to look at is my net difference in rent. So let's say I could look for a $400 a month rent bump, right? Maybe it's being rented right now for $700 and I could rent it out for $1,100. Well, for me, I'd probably be willing to pay upwards of $4,800 to buy out that tenancy, because my logic is that within 1 year, my increase in rent will have paid for itself, right? And then what's great is going on, I presumably have as good or a better tenant in place because I've selected the tenant myself. So again, sometimes we get lucky and inherit good tenants, but lots of times I think most of us landlords know that you often inherit some of the worst tenants, and the best tenants seem to move on or just never live in the properties that we're buying. And that's part of our business model as well. So I can't really complain about that. But that's just maybe a little bit of food for thought there, because I'd hate to see you lose out on an opportunity to increase your gross rents overall. Because realistically, the way I view it, that $14,000 or $20,000 I spent on renovation, that's probably made the property worth another $14,000 to $20,000 at least. Like I could probably just turn around and resell it for that. So yeah, just kind of food for thought. That's kind of my basic back of the envelope number when I'm calculating the upper threshold of what I'd be willing to pay cash for keys.
I like that. I never thought about that because obviously my capital is pretty much well used up too as well. So
Sure. And yeah,
I'm
it's a lot easier when you're maybe at different stages in the investing game, right? Like I've been doing this for a while. So the idea of just going out there and getting more capital isn't something that feels prohibitive to me. But I think it's really cool that you bought a 6-plex and now you're buying a 10-plex in the same little pocket to be building up a portfolio of 16 units so quickly is really awesome.
well, thank you.
So
Thanks.
what's kind of next for you on the horizon?
Well, you know what? This I want to just keep going, man. I think my goal is by the time I'm 40, I want to have at least 100 units, which I'm only 34, so I should be able to get there, I think.
Yeah.
Um, Following Casey Wong, I'm like really inspired. I'm about to buy something tomorrow again, you know?
That's
Um,
awesome. And so right
but
now, are you buying with partners or are you buying by yourself?
so it's just me and my partner, my girlfriend. She,
Awesome.
we're actually very fortunate to have her mom, and her mom helps us out a lot. So she's a very, very passive aggressive investor, and she doesn't really want money in return. So we give her money saying, hey, yeah, like we want you to help us and we want you to feel good about it, not just like, helping my daughter. I want
Hmm.
you to make some money too, right? Because in the end of the day, she could be the a partner, like paying up some big money to get the next big job.
Yeah,
So gratefully, I'm very, very blessed to have someone like her to help us out with that. And actually, she helped us out with our very first home, just buying a home. That was it, And then we
oh,
sold the
nice.
home and then did the flip and then just kind of rippled our way up. And here we are.
That's awesome, man. And then building towards that 100 units, are you planning to kind of like just the two of you together build that up? Will you start attracting money partners into it, or what are the plans there?
Yeah. So we haven't really been like we don't go to any like meetings or any of that, but that's going to be our next step as soon as COVID and everything kind of coincides. Or that's our next step is we're going to start doing hardcore networking so that we can get investors that are like-minded, like yourself, to get involved because you can't do it alone. It's pretty much impossible, right?
Hmm.
So that yes, we definitely are going to have partners eventually down the road.
Awesome. One thing I'd really encourage you that I know a lot of newer investors with hindsight regret is not documenting the projects they've already done. So I would really encourage you to, as you own this property, if a unit comes up, like you don't need to become a YouTube star, but like take a quick little photo of it, right? Or take a little video of it and just build up that content bank because it's honest, like you can always decide not to share it, but you can never decide to recapture it, right? So if you don't capture it in the moment, and I know that for the first 6 years, I essentially told no one what I was doing, didn't take any photos, didn't share shit. And I kind of had this chip on my shoulder that like, I'm just going to show them, right? I'm going to show them what's up. I'm going to show them that I don't need anyone. And while it's definitely true that an investor can choose that path, I think that it's almost playing with a handicap when you're not willing to let people know what you're up to. So I don't know if you've dipped a toe into sharing even just on your Facebook profile what you're up to and stuff like that, but it can be shocking if you leave a couple breadcrumb trails. Some people will find their way back to you and they will choose to really you know take you up on the next deal. And one of the big things, again, especially when you're hitting friends and family potentially as JV partners, it's almost like trying to think of what would be a good analogy, but they almost need to miss out on one or two deals before they decide to jump in. And so, like, you could literally give them the perfect deal on a silver platter, and odds are they're going to say no the first time. And then the second time, you could literally give them like an okay deal, and they'll be like, yeah, let's do it. And it's because they just almost needed to like get that little bit of FOMO, right? That fear of missing out on the first one. And a project like this 10plex, it's a project that feels satisfying, I think, to almost any size investor, right? Like 10 units feels like substantial. Whether it is or isn't doesn't actually really matter. But like to an outsider looking in, they're going to be like, wow, this guy's doing something. He's bought 10 units at once, right? Like that's the sort of thing I want to get in on. And I know a lot of Canadians naturally fear that, oh my goodness, like I don't want to be bragging. I don't want to think people think that I'm rich or this, that, and the other. Most people aren't going to jump to those conclusions. And in fact, we find that most people will self-select out, right? Like the person that leaves a rude comment is only going to leave that one rude comment and then they're going to move on. Where there's going to be 10 people watching in silence, they're like, that's kind of cool what Kevin's up to. Like, I might hit him up on the next one. And again, if just people don't know at all what you're doing, there's no way they can ever bridge the gap and try and help you, right?
That's very true. I mean, I actually don't. I don't do that on Facebook. I don't leave the little breadcrumbs and stuff. I figured that for a long-term game, I should definitely get started doing that because you're right. It may not be. It may be a year from now, and that guy might be the biggest investor that I got. You just never know.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Because I've had like, I could share anecdotal stories, but where, someone like a friend and they're like, no, we're just not ready to do it. And then what happens is 2 years later, they reach out to me and they're like, hey, we've been watching what you're doing and like, we want in now. And again, you never know, but the power of social media is that you can have a one-to-many conversation, right? Where when you're at that local REI meetup group, so say you're at, Onria or Right Club or a Cash Flow Tribe event, you can really only talk to the person in front of you or a small group. And once that conversation's done, it kind of dies with the people that you had it with. Where when you post that one photo on Facebook, a year from now, Facebook's going to be like, remember this memory? And you can just share it. And you're like, oh, still on this property. And I've actually bought a couple more. And people are like, oh, shit. Yeah, I kind of remember him sharing that a year ago. And you mean he didn't go bankrupt? Huh. I thought real estate was going to crash and Kevin was going to lose everything. But I mean, it's just kept going up since then. So maybe we should reach out, and like, just again, those breadcrumbs are priceless because it's so hard to like, you can try and compress time by sharing a lot all at once, but I find it easier to just have that drip campaign, that little trickle.
Yeah, it's funny because in the very beginning, even just convincing, my mother-in-law to just give us anything was very, very hard, right? But then she saw the first house, and then we flipped. You know what I mean? Then it was like, yeah, here, what do you want? Take it. I got this much. So we're like, okay.
Nothing breeds trust like success, right? So again, if you're not letting people even know that you're succeeding or at least not failing, it's hard for them to then want to bet on you. But if they know that you're doing well, like the moment you're crushing it as an investor is when everyone's just throwing money at you, right? Like that's when you've really hit a certain level because again, it's just that bandwagon effect, right? Where they want to jump on. So, anyways, really, I do have to wrap up here, Kevin, but really appreciate you sharing this deal, kind of this perspective. I also love the fact that I got to go down memory lane, and I'm pretty sure I could have bought this for, I don't know, was it $700,000 or $800,000 5 or 6 years ago? And I can't help but think that it would have been a good investment then, and it's likely a good investment now. So again, I think you've got potential here. I'd love to see you generate one or two of those cash for keys just to get your income up. And I'm sure if you got one or two tenant turnovers, that's going to safely get you into that $1,000 a month cash flow. But I definitely see long-term upside with this property, both from an appreciation side as well as the rent perspective. Because again, I think you've just got it just feels like a nice little garden, little picturesque place. So before we do wrap up, if people want to follow along on your social media, can they? And if so, how should they do so?
Yeah, so my social media, yeah, you can do it. I guess on Instagram, I don't really do too much, but there's some stuff in there if you want a good laugh for sure. It's just Kevin Kouto and just my last name Kouto.
Awesome. Well, appreciate it, Kevin. I'm going to jump off here for the next call, but appreciate you sharing. And definitely let us know after you close. Feel free to reach out, and I'd love to do a follow-up.
I guarantee it's going to happen. I guarantee I will.